we do have a few questions queued up, and I sort of consolidated a couple into a couple of comments first. So one of the things asked is about user management. Can we delete a user? Nope. Users cannot be removed. They can only be deactivated. And of course, within your organization, your organizational admin can change a user's status to active false or remove an admin role from another user. And then the secretariat, for example, could deactivate an org admin for a CNA. For example, if that user moved on to another company or something like that. Another question was, let's say we're using Vulnagram and we want to just download the JSON. We don't want to actually publish at this time, but we want to use it to create JSON. Sure, you can do that, whether it's version 5 or version 4. Please stop using version 4. Move to the new services. It's wonderful. Go with 5. But let's say, for example, you needed to. During these early days of the CVE services rollout, while there's still some prioritized issues being worked, if your workflow says don't adopt yet, you want to use JSON 4, go ahead and use Vulnagram to create that JSON file and download it. And either through the GitHub pilot or the web form, you could publish until you're ready to move to JSON 5 and use the services. Or if your internal workflow says, hey, we want to produce these JSON files, but somebody else has to sign off on them, great. Download them from Vulnagram, have people look at them, and then submit them again through Vulnagram or some other tool if you want. Did I represent that correctly, Art, those two things?
That sounds correct to me. Yes.
Okay,
And
great.
yes, I'd like to, sorry, Dave. Yes, everyone,
Go ahead.
this is the workshop. This is the time. Sorry, small pontification. You want to put your energy into, services in JSON 5. Of course, there's backwards compat and transition, no question there. But if you're going to spend hours and hours figuring out something in JSON 4, uninvited advice is, really consider putting those hours into JSON 5 instead. Thanks, Dave. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, good. So another question was, can you update a CVE by loading it, then updating it? Do you have to overwrite? So that's not specific to a client, but to CVE services generally. You want to talk about publishing versus updating?
Sure. So this is perhaps slightly better illustrated through the API docs. Publishing for the first time happens to be a HTTP post request, and a CNA can publish for the first time. You are calling you're calling the same endpoint with a different HTTP verb of put to do the updates. The clients all handle that without you needing to know the difference between the two. If you're writing your own client, you're going to want to pay attention to what HTTP verb you are sending. But that's it. The idea is you post the first one, update whenever you feel like it. You are the CNA. You own that content. You own that ID. You are working within the CNA container. We have not implemented and worked out the ADP stuff yet. So update to your heart's content. I don't think there's more to it than that. But yeah, does that answer the question? Hopefully.
I think so.
Okay.
Gosh, feel free to raise hands or post in chat if we can expand more. So another one that came up is about basically up conversion. Are we going to provide an up converter? And maybe one of the board members, Art, yourself, or any of the other board members could talk about what we are going to provide as far as up-down conversion, why or why not we might be providing things, and what the effort is if somebody wants to create their own.
I will briefly say that during the current phase of transition, and there is no endpoint to this phase set yet, the plans are to both up and down convert. So submissions via the older methodologies, GitHub pilot or the web form in JSON 4 will get up converted to JSON 5 and be available through the API and through the newer website. Submissions in 5 will be down converted to 4 and put into, for instance, the the CVE list GitHub repository. Some of the known issues, which we have documented previously, have to do with the up and down conversion. It's not perfect in some cases. There are some version range issues, I think, going from maybe 5 to 4. So for the transition period of time, which is not determined, but I expect it to be on the order of months, we're supporting both, again, with the encouragement that now is a great time to move over to 5. The 4 things will be deprecated at some point in the future, and I will leave a moment here if anybody wants to correct what I've said or improve it.
Anybody from the board or the development team have any comments about up or down conversion? Okay, great. Oh, I see a hand up. Let me just check who that is. That's Chris. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that. I think that what Art described is definitely true, and I think it's also the case though that right now there are no secretary or program provided utilities for the community to do their own up conversion, down conversion, right? If that's something you want to invest in to do, you can do that. But right now the program has not provided, doesn't have those utilities for CNAs to use in their space. We do that up conversion, down conversion as part of the submission processing, but not necessarily making clients available, if you will, to do that out in client space.
Great. Thanks, Chris. That's helpful. A couple more questions have come in. One of them is GUI client going to be available for bulk update or submission? For example, when a public blog URL changes and we need to update the reference link for all the CVE records previously submitted.
Yeah, my take on that is I would probably instrument CVE lib, and if I was managing my entries and I've got to add a blog post to 5 CVE entries. The clients, I don't think, delve that far back into your or our internal processes, but I would instrument, I need an update to these 5 vulnerabilities, these 5 CVEs, and that would be some sort of loop that would go out and call, CVE lib 5 times with the update. That's probably how I would approach that. I don't think any of these clients, even Vulnogram, which is very full featured, doesn't inherently have the concept of multi-CVE updates in one button click.
Roger that. And just to remind everybody, let's say you'd like credentials to use the test environment, just like production. If you want credentials to access the systems, come through the Secretariat, first through your root, and then through the Secretariat so that we can issue your organization credentials. And then once you have an organizational admin credential for either for production, then you can issue internal users for production, and for test, then you can issue internal users for test. And then somebody asked, Art, if you wouldn't mind demonstrating how to add a user using Vulnogram if you've still got it up.
I did that while we were talking. That was, I think, Monica.
Great.
And I think she acknowledged in the chat that she saw me.
Thanks so much.
So I did add you. It's a couple clicks.
Great. I don't see any more hands up, and I may have missed questions in the chat. If anybody on my team sees a question I missed, please holler. That may be it, Art. Oh, I see another hand up from Michael. Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Sorry, I know we just talked about the bulk thing. We do about anywhere from 100 to 150 CVEs a year, and we have our own in-house JSON generator. Is there any plan to? Would it just be incumbent upon us as a company to make something to bulk submit, or is there any plan to eventually add some kind of capability like that?
Yeah, sorry, please, Dave, go ahead. Yeah.
No, Art, you're free to answer. I was going to ask Chris Britton what's on the roadmap.
That's a good way to go. I do not recall such a discussion topic recently. I would, again, my suggestion from earlier would be, if you're generating your own JSON, look to CVE lib to orchestrate the rest of that. But yeah, pardon me. If Chris or someone else knows better about our future plans, by all means.
I was going to say, sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna, I didn't quite hear the whole question. It was a little muted for me on my end. So probably need a restatement of the question. So.
Batch update of, they're asking about the capability for batch update of CVEs. And I was actually going to say, well, generally, if you have 100, 150 CVEs or any number, you don't update them all at once. Normally, you obviously meter them out throughout the year whenever they come in. So most people don't have the batch update requirement unless they like got them all wrong and want to change them all, you know. But I don't see why you would otherwise need a batch operation.
Yeah, I'm hearing one of the requests from earlier was, right, I've got, I don't know, I published 5 CVEs for a batch of vulnerabilities that come in. You know, the reporter or researcher updates their blog post or has a new blog comes out covering all 5. Maybe I want to add 5 references, the same reference to each ID. And yeah, I think as it says in the chat here, you know, my take on that would be loop CVE lib.
I think you kind of have to, because you have
yeah.
to pull the CNA container before you can update it, because you have to make sure you have the latest. So we just talked about this in the working group the other day. You have to pull it to update it.
I think one of the tricks is
publishing.
I think one of the tricks, or one of the main thing is, because I've been playing around with the API or using curl commands and whatnot. I know that Art was talking about not necessarily do it, but we do low volume. But it seems like one of the key pieces, if you're going to automate a batch, is that the API command, or the command that goes across either if you're doing post or put. For the actual posting of the CVE, you actually have to have the CVE ID in the command, right? So yeah, I think that's what the challenge is for a batch.
Yeah, I'll venture quickly to assume, and that's dangerous, right? If you're in the hundreds per year level, and you're able to write some software, or at least as qualified as me as a developer, yeah, you can wrap CVE lib, or do your own stuff. But it's doable. I am a partial developer at best. I had some help from the devs of all these clients, but this can be figured out. It takes there's some testing and change cost, but this is the time to put it in. Oh yeah, sorry, CVE lib. Sorry. I think the JavaScript client, CVE client, and then the one I didn't look at all, CVE.js. If you have a JavaScript environment, you can import those libraries as well. So.
Right on. Thank you, Art. Well, we're able to stay on if folks have more questions. I don't see hands up. There's some good stuff happening in the chat. Art, you can see the chat too. What do you think?
I can hang out a bit. I'm sort of keeping an eye on things here, but why don't we maybe we could officially wrap up, since we said we'd stop at, I believe, the hour here. And if it's okay, and if folks want to hang out for a few minutes and chat about how to submit things technically, I at least can hang around for a little while.
Sounds good. Chris Levendis, anything you wanted to say to wrap up?
I second what Art says, and just build on that by saying that really, if you have questions about anything that you've heard today, or how what you've heard today might impact you going down the road, feel free to ask those kinds of questions as well.
Roger that.
Yeah. So stupid question, but we are live as of today, right? I mean, if we want to start submitting 5s and rolling from here, we're good to go, right?
Cool. Yes.
Yeah, please go to the transition information website and see those prioritized issues and assess whether they impact you immediately. Right on. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll stay online for a while if there are more questions, but this was really great. Thanks. Thanks to all the presenters.
Thank you.
Somebody asked, when will the video be posted? That'll take us a while because we record it in one long vid. We got to chop it up and make it, consumable by topic, but that'll end up on our YouTube channel eventually. Not too long, I hope.
And Dave, did you see the question about the email for the Slack channel?
I didn't. They're scrolling by too quick. Go ahead, Chris.
Hold on, I have to go find it again.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
I responded, I put my email in there. Anybody can invite anybody to the channel, but if they can send me an email, I'll get them in.
I think
Thanks.
if you just go there, you can sign up as well. If you use an email that's from a CNA at least, because I just signed up today and it just let me in.
Excellent. That's even better.
And I
we
think
have
I
Frank's hand is up, Dave.
okay, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, so we have a Git-based workflow now to mimic the workflow or to match the workflow that you have, and I like it because it forces reviews and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking about writing and upload a GitHub action that will actually validate your records and submit them for you once you merge them into main. That tool, it doesn't feel right if it runs under my personal account. Also because I'm an organizational admin. Is that a valid use case to get a group account?
Be happy to talk with you about that. Yeah.
Okay, so just put the question out to the secretariat.
How I would handle that is, certainly the CNA, right? You're responsible for all your account activity. There's no question, I think, there. I heard it said a couple of times earlier, but right, I might have an email address that's, automation@myorg.com, and I, use that account for my automatic CVE interface stuff. I don't think we're saying not to do that. The CNAs are responsible for their actions, of course, but if you're going to automate and have sort of treat one of your user accounts as a machine account, I think that's perfectly within, there does not have to be a physical human at the end of every single account, I would hope.
Okay.
We do ask that.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I'll just interject
please,
and say we need somebody to sign the agreement that they are responsible for the actions, and that's part of the application form for a CVE Services account. So if you have some situation that is, very much outside that, we should talk through it one-on-one.
This came up in the work. Sorry.
Yeah, whatever you name that email, it could be banana@mycompany.com, as long as a human is responsible for that and all the actions of that account.
Yeah, okay. I think we can handle that.
One way to do it is if you can either have one person on the hook, if there's some kind of breach, that's the person that's going to be pointed at, or if, like, we have a separate app as well, an internal app, but when it goes to do the interaction, not all those people have, and we're not going to give them all CVE Services accounts, but we can trace back who said go. And so if there was an issue that we know this one either submitted under this account, we know who it was who did it on our end. That's one way.
Right. You have an internal web portal app, and you use single sign-on in your organization, and so you have logging of what user accessed your app.
Exactly.
Good.
Works for me.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you. Then I'm buggering off as well.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Hey Dave, I got a question. Where can we find the test creds for the test instance?
We will issue you test creds. Now, is MITRE your root?
Yes.
Okay, great. Just go to the web form, say other, I want credentials for the test instance, and then we'll validate that with you. We're going to make sure that you're not a hacker or a spammer trying to get creds. And then we'll send you the link to fill out the form.
Got it. Awesome. So basically, that's the same process as if we were requesting new creds.
Production, testing, anything. We want to
Got
make
it.
sure the systems are as safe as we can.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Well, we've captured a lot of good questions in the chat and some great answers too. So we will get those into FAQs later. Of course, people are encouraged to use Slack to communicate with the community and help each other. Oh, there's a hand up. Hey, Daniel, go ahead. Daniel, can you hear me? Maybe. How about Jody?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And I apologize. So I'm very new to this. My company was just acquired by another larger company, and so we are sort of new to doing the CNA stuff. Where can I find out who our designated or assigned OA is? There are only 3 of us on the team. And then also, if we could get the URL for the Slack channel, please.
Sure. If you can see the chat here, do you see at the top I pinned a message? There's some cool links in there. And then just hit cve.org, click on the web form, submit your question. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Art, for showing that, or whoever's showing. So
Thank you.
anything like, yeah, you bet. Anything like, who's our OA, or how do I get credentials? Feel free to just ask that question in this web form. Why do I say that? Because this goes into our ticketing system. We triage it to
Huh.
the right person, and we make sure that by tracking our tickets, we get back to you. So, rather than sending us an email, it's usually best to go through the web form and get in the ticketing system.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Good question. Okay. I don't see any other hand. Oh, yeah, there we go. Hey, Daniel, go ahead.
Second attempt. Thank you.
Good.
All right. So, question about user management. You explained that there's a problem about bot accounts because there's nobody who can sign an agreement with your terms of service. But if I'm an org admin and I create new users through the API, the user that I create also doesn't agree to your terms of service. What am I missing?
Well, I'm not an attorney, though I've played one on TV. Um, you bring up a good point. The org admin is taking the responsibility by signing that agreement that they will use, good best practice when they manage users in their organization.
Thank you.
Sure.
Another question, if there's time.
Yeah, doch.
We have quite significant tooling on top of the existing JSON v4 in our organization, since we submit several hundred CVEs every year. And we're looking at quite a bit of changes as a result from the v5 migration. Do you have any expectation that the format will undergo a similar large-scale overhaul in, let's say, the next few years again, so that it's not worth building our own stuff on top of it and relying on the format staying as it is? Or is it generalized enough that we don't expect there to be significant changes as opposed to just stuff being added?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a great question, very appropriate. And from what I know of the QWG roadmap, there is time before any major change. But let me ask the board, anybody from the QWG wants to address that?
Well, that is correct. So we do have version 6 on the roadmap, and that is mainly meant for any considerations that could break the tooling. So if there is a change requested to a JSON format, people want to add new fields or want to change the restrictions or on the field, or change the change any rules on the schema. The consideration is it going to break any tooling? If it's going to break any existing tooling, we postpone it to version 6. But if it's an addition that's not going to break any existing tooling, it would go into version 5. So this would be minor changes or new fields that don't really change much of the structure. Those could go into version 5. But to our answer, yes, the consideration is to make sure like none of the CNA tooling breaks, at least for the considerable future, with any changes that go into the schema.
So how does an organization that's concerned participate in making those decisions?
Be part of the QWG. Can subscribe. It's a quality working group, meets once in 2 weeks. And most of the work is carried out on this GitHub repo. And any changes that are forthcoming, they will be communicated to. Yeah, you shouldn't have a surprise, a breaking change in the format that's disruptive would not come as a surprise.
Okay, thank you.
So we have a number of working groups. A couple of them are open to public. The QWG is not open, but you can, of course, join. Shandon, do you want them to reach out to you or come through the web request form? What do you want?
I feel I can come through the web request form.
Sure.
Or contact the
sure.
secretary to get added to the mailing list.
Okay. Excellent. Good questions.
Yes, Michael, over to you.
Hi. So I saw when you were using or demonstrating Volnogram that we can reserve, it look like 1, 5, or 10 CVE IDs at a time. Did I see that correctly, or? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think those are some sort of preset buttons that Volnogram sort of supports. You can reserve one, you can reserve a batch. There are options for it to be a sequential or non-sequential set of records if you so choose. Let me see if it's where reserve is. Yeah, there's some options, and I get Volnogram is abstracting it to the web interface. But yes, you did see a 5 and a 10 option in Volnogram, and I think we recently opened reservations for 2023, so you could do that as well. Depending how low you're going to get into, writing your own versus clicking on the web forms, you have some options here.
Okay. And
Excuse me. Yep.
yeah, so
Go ahead.
so you said that this was available to. So I'm not a developer, and I am super new to security, and I just started working here not too long ago. So this is all very new to me. Would this be something? Could we like clone this and adjust it to say like we have an upcoming batch of like 30 CVEs. Like, is this something that we could adapt to say, hey, can we get 30 sequential CVEs? And then I could talk to our tools team about creating something that could, uh, progressively generate our new CVEs using this.
That sounds pretty reasonable. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for your organization, but here I just reserved 30. So it took me 3 clicks in this case. Personally, I would not want to assign someone to write these up one at a time in Vulnogram. I would suggest you ask someone to do if you have some devs on your team, then do something more batch oriented. But it's simple to reserve if you're a CNA. And at the 30 level, you're not going to want to write them by hand, in my experience.
Yeah, and
Individually, yeah.
And that's what we've been doing historically. Like we do the big batch request at the beginning of the year, or when we start running low, we request like say 30 or so more. And then as these issues populate, we put them in our ticket when they're ready to go out. So we can just CSV and then export to our tool that just spits out all the JSON files at once that we can use that we would just drop in the web form. So
that sounds like a very, very common workflow, and I'll suggest that the idea of getting a batch reservation early in the year and updating it as you need it, that has sort of shifted to on demand, because that's how the reservation can now work. And as far as the way you're handling it internally, that sounds like a very common practice. The suggestion, of course, is to start spitting out JSON 5, not JSON 4, as you can get to that.
Okay, yeah, just trying to make this as easy for our team and our tools team as possible. So yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
If I can share my screen a little bit. So Vulnogram also supports what's called a persistent or server version. What it lets you do is that you'll have to do some installation and so on. So you can, if you install it with a backend database, all your entries are coming from a backend database, which is a MongoDB. So all your JSON entries are stored there. You can have internal workflows and say who in your team is working on it, what's the status, review, kind of get the thing to a review. And then you can do bulk operations on the backend too. Like you can have Mongo queries that dump the JSON and then have CVE lib CLI to kind of bulk up all of them. But it does give you an interface to do your review workflow. And you could generate, all these entries could be automatically generated based on your other tooling and dumped into a database, and they start appearing here. And then you need to, once in a while, if you need to just go change one of them, you can always use this as a one-time editor, a time to edit and then publish immediately.
Yeah, I glossed over this by saying Vulnogram is much more rich featured than we were demonstrating today, but it has a lot more integration, as Chandan is showing here. MIT license, grab it and go. Yeah, if you want to.
And so it's a bulk. Again, it's probably, and somebody needs to code it. You could say, select all the CVEs and had a button that says, okay, publish all of them at once. It would go fetch one by one from the database, call the client and do it. But that feature is not there. But it's it needs some development work.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for showing me that. Appreciate that.
Daniel, got your hand up.
Yep. Another question. One benefit I thought of the GitHub-based pilot was that we basically got a sort of history of CVE entries for free with the changes kind of logged in the repo. Looking at the API documentation of CVE services, that appears to be completely gone. There's only whatever the current version is. Is that correct? Are there plans to have a history of CVE entries?
Yeah, I can take that one, Dave. That's a very good point. And in the AWG, that requirement has been discussed, but we haven't put it on the development roadmap as of yet. I think what may work a bit in this space is our bulk download architecture, which is not implemented yet, as we noted in the initial early briefs. We'll still continue to use GitHub as the bulk download source, And so we may be able to get some of that back with respect to using that GitHub environment for the bulk download capability. Over.
But that's limited to version 4, right? Or will there be a version 5 GitHub system?
Yes. Right now, version 4 through the GitHub submission pilot, is available, and the architecture for our bulk download capability right now is looking to use GitHub as the point at which we will send the downstream users to download the JSON 5.0 CVE list.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's not. But be clear, it's not implemented yet, right? We're still, for the downstream users. Where we are right now is this whole soft deploy has been focused on submission. Not GitHub, but CVE Record JSON 5.0 submission, and the next, hard deploy, which is in the next quarter, with focus on the bulk download capability, which we're architecting to go into GitHub, much like the current list. JSON 4 list lives right now.
Right, makes sense. Thank you. I mean, if there's nothing else, nobody else asking questions, in a versioning scheme like Maven or Semver, how would I express when I have a versioning model that looks like Ubuntu, where I have a linear versions, and then occasionally I branch off a stable branch. When I fix a vulnerability in both the stable branch and the development branch, where the base version, the baseline of the stable branch would be an affected version. How do I express that in a way that for both lines, all future versions would also be considered to be fixed?
And so that's where the status changes could be used. So that's one reason. So you would start the version with the version branch that is getting affected, right? And then you made, and then go to the status changes and kind of add entries. And so you would define your, yeah. And so you would then go to the status changes there, the changes at the plus item next to the less than.
Sorry, not there.
Okay.
Oh, here. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you would put these multiple. Essentially, the thing is that your base branch has multiple forks. For each fork, that you could have one entry here that says at these stages in that fork, you got to fix. It's one way. Again, the multiple ways to do this. But this is one way where that kind of complicated versioning could be represented. Other thing that people are planning to do is also use the Git commit itself as a version identifier. And so you could say status changes add, use the version type of a Git commit. I think it says Git or something. If you use the version type Git, you could use the Git identifiers to identify when exactly which commits represent a fix.
Do we know how well that is supported by consumers of CVE metadata?
So this is a new feature. It's a new data format, and I believe so. Some of this structure was based on input from people who were consuming it and using it for vulnerability analysis. And also, there is no you're not limited to one entry. So if you have multiple ways of representing the versions, you can have multiple entries. Essentially, look at this as a case statement. You have some version at hand, and you want to kind of go check if it falls in any of these ranges. And so you can have one entry for Git commits, one entry for the human readable version labels that you are using.
Right, but the algorithm says the first range that has the version that I'm checking included defines its status, whether it's vulnerable or not, right? So
Yeah.
if I define a range that has affected versions, then I only fall through to the Git commit if I am beyond the affected version, right? But if the affected version range kind of has a false positive entry, that doesn't help me. I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, so it is possible. So it is possible somebody could, there's no way to kind of cross check if these entries actually make sense, right? So see, one of the I think the beauty with the record update submission is that all this data is publicly available, and if there is a mistake, somebody flags the mistake, the CNA can then go update the record and publish it. It's kind of a self-service model. It is kind of meant to, so the data is there. The thing is, like, I would say maybe garbage in, garbage out, right? If somebody puts in version ranges that don't make sense, they are going to be visible. If a consumer looks into it, can't make sense, they contact the CNA and maybe help them fix the ranges.
Yeah, and just to add briefly, versions, ranges, dependencies is a hugely complicated mess. Vulnogram and JSON 5 both have significant updates to handle them all better. We didn't magically solve it here, right? There's no global agreement on how versions work. Excuse me. So part of that's just too much for CVE to also handle, alter, or solve or take on. But again, both Vulnogram and JSON 5 are a lot better than the previous status.
Okay, thank you. This looks like something that I'll really need to look into, because right now we specify backported security fixes and all of that, and then our users get alerts from GitHub, and NVD has the wrong content, and I'm sitting here, why did I even bother?
Bit of a mess. I'm at my limit for extension. Whoever's in charge, feel free to keep running things, but I'm going to drop off here. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Art. Really great. Really appreciate it.
Are there other questions?
Can someone post the link for the location to get the API key?
If you need credentials for either production or testing in CVE services, your root is the right person to go to. And if that's MITRE, just go to our web form, cve.org, click on the web form link, put in a request, say, I'd like some credentials for production, testing, whatever. We will then validate that with your organization, validate it's a good request, and direct you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sure, you bet. Thanks.